Good morning. Good to see you again. Glad to see you all came back. I thought Brett Bear was great last night. That was a lot of fun. I think that was the best Trump impersonation I've heard since Trump. And I hope you enjoyed my panel, my talk yesterday. Thank you. And one shameless plug, my book is now up on Amazon to pre-order, so enjoy it. We're going to talk this morning more about American history and draw this conversation to literature, poetry, but also places, historic sites, and monuments. Because sometimes we forget how much those things, those physical things, actually teach our history. To connect my talk yesterday about the Declaration in this panel, on July 9th, I always like to use my dates, Washington instructed his armies to come together for morning orders and have the Declaration read to them, as he said in his orders, in a loud and proud voice. And so the Declaration was read to his troops. You might recall that Washington's headquarters were in Manhattan, which at the time was not very well developed, which meant if you looked from the tip of Manhattan, you could actually make out British ships landing troops on Staten Island. So the Declaration was being read to them while they knew the British were actually landing. After the Declaration was read, some of his soldiers decided to go down to Bowling Green Park, where there was a grand, large equestrian statue of George III. And they decided to tear it down. And so they used grappling hooks and pulled it over. And they took it down. Washington didn't like this revelry, a little too revolutionary for him, but he quietly allowed the statue to be melted down to create lead bullets for the Continental Army. Statues are important. We have a great panel this morning, three old dear friends and new that we're going to hear from. And I'm going to introduce them very briefly. I encourage you to read up more about them. And we're going to begin today, I'll read them in the order they're going to be speaking. Bill McClay, he's actually a colleague of mine at Hillsdale College. He's in our history department, in many ways, or kind of one of our great cores of our history department. And he is the author, most importantly, of Land of Hope, which is available out on the table, which is a wonderful story. It's actually, the subtitle is Invitation to the Great American Story, presentation of American history that is great for us to read, but also is being used a lot as a textbook in lots of schools. So I encourage you to look at that. He'll be followed by Brenda Hafera. She's the assistant director of the Kenneth Simon Center for American Studies at the Heritage Foundation. You'll see she's delightful and has written some wonderful things, and they're doing some wonderful things she's going to bring your attention to. And then thirdly, we're going to hear from Sabin Howard. He is an artist, a sculptor, and among other things, if you've not seen it, he did the World War I memorial in Washington, D.C., which I've gone to many times. It is just a remarkable creation. He's going to talk about some of his additional work. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Bill and have our panel, and then afterwards we will have a conversation.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me all right? Okay. Oh, yeah, now we're not, the other one is kicking in. Yes. It's great to be here. I was here a couple of years ago, and it was like a dreamland. It's even better this time. And I remember that you all like to ask questions, so I'll try not to overuse my time. We're here to begin the process of celebrating the 250th anniversary of the creation of our country. But looking forward means looking backward, remembering, thinking back to the first 4th of July celebration, which is the date on which we emerged as a free and independent nation, proclaimed in the words of the Declaration of Independence. So that's what we celebrate. And that's what we're going to celebrate July 4th of 2026, this great event that is at the center of our reason for being as a nation. It's a great flame that lights the imaginations of brave men and women who made this country possible against great odds and made it a beacon to the world. So our future depends in some way on our appropriating, our making our own of our past. The study of history has many uses. I'm a historian by training, but I think this is the first among them, the work of memory. Not just memorizing facts, not just memorizing tables of presidential terms or anything like that, something deeper. And no great or enduring human enterprise can be sustained without memory. No matter how determined and focused we are, we're sure to lose our way unless we regularly look back, reorient ourselves, see where we came from and where we want to go, remembering our deep connection of gratitude with those who came before us. If we don't have these points of reference, we not only forget the succession of historical events, names, places, stories that form the past, we eventually forget who we are. Let me offer an example to explain what I mean by that somewhat dramatic statement about forgetting who we are. The example comes not from American history, but from a practice that began in the ancient Near East and continues to this day. The Passover Seder. The Passover Seder is a ritual meal at the heart of Judaism. It involves a retelling every year of the story of the miraculous liberation of the Israelites from slavery in ancient Egypt. It's taken from the book of Exodus in the Bible. The Seder itself is based on the biblical verse commanding Jews to retell the story of the Exodus from Egypt. You shall tell your child on that day, saying, it is because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. Exodus 13:8. It's a story of liberation, of grateful liberation, a story that defines the people, a story that's helped them remember who they are year in and year out through many centuries filled with tribulation and suffering. The story of the Exodus has been a central part of Western civilization, taking new forms along the way. The New England Puritans in the 17th century saw their perilous trek across the ocean in search of religious liberty as a repetition of the Israelites' flight to freedom and pursuit of Zion. 2 centuries later, Brigham Young brought his Latter-day Saints into the Salt Valley to commence their exodus. Enslaved Africans looked to the Exodus story as a hopeful sign of their eventual freedom as they sang, "Go down, Moses, tell old Pharaoh, let my people go." So it's an image that pops up again and again. I don't know how many drug treatment programs are called Exodus, but the same idea, the release from enslavement to some kind of sin or addiction into the freedom of being fully in possession of yourself. So when it came time for the United States of America to design its great seal that's used to designate official documents, both Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson thought that it should depict the Exodus. And these, as you know, neither one of them are particularly religious guys in any conventional or orthodox sense of the term. And it would depict, in their vision, Moses extending his hand over the Red Sea as they swamped Pharaoh's pursuing army. And the seal should bear this slogan, both of them agreed, Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. Well, unfortunately, we didn't get that design. I think I would have preferred it, but you have to take what you get. But it did show that they understood very well what Americans need to remember about themselves, who they are, that they are a free people, free under God. So remembering who we are is very important, and it's not something that comes automatically. So what happens when we no longer remember these things? And our society is coming dangerously close to that very state. We've lost the general grasp on the larger trajectory of our history, of our story, of who we are. It's small wonder that so many young Americans come into adulthood without a sense of membership in this society whose story is one of the greatest in human history. Our young people deserve an awareness of the exceptional character of our great experiment in self-rule. Do they realize that there's never before in human history been a nation which committed itself in writing to the idea that all human beings are equal in the eyes of God, and that the only legitimate form of government is one in which the government is answerable to the people it governs? No, they don't know that, by and large. But they deserve to know. That's the chief part of their legacy as Americans. Instead, they're being provided an entirely different account of things. Instead of learning about the greatness and uniqueness of the American story and learning how they came to be a part of the story and can be even more a part of the story, they hear a story filled with shame and failure, a parade of horribles from which they understandably want to distance themselves. We have to do better than that. It's time to light a candle and offer the public something else. This is why I wrote Land of Hope, the book that Matt so nicely plugged. And shameless plug, we're about to come out with a second edition, much expanded. So be on the lookout for that. It's supposed to come out in December, but I hope we can get it earlier. And I emphasize hope and the role of hope throughout the book. Why did I do that? Because I wanted to emphasize the spirit that drives so much of our history. We're not just explicable in material terms. We are creatures with wills and aspirations. We're not merely tumbleweeds at the mercy of larger historical forces. Hope is a quality of soul, something that can't be explained or measured in strictly material terms. Of course, the capacity for hope is not unique to us, but it has been a consistent characteristic of our society, our country. Americans have always sought to rise above the hand we've been dealt, the conditions into which we were born. That's what's drawn so many people to these shores and continues to do so today. We are the most aspirational nation in the history of the world. So part of telling our history, part of conveying that to young people, is conveying that part of our history, the sense of our spirit of aspiration. And to keep in mind something that almost nobody that I know of teaches, at least on the secondary, on the higher education level, that history is a form of moral formation. We are forming young people to be susceptible to, or directed towards, I should say, citizenship, the citizenship that you have to have in a republic of self-governing individuals. A history, an aspiration that points toward and presumes the dignity and value of each individual person. All men are created equal. It's a history that looks to the past with gratitude and respect, and not the arrogance of wokeness that all previous times are morally inferior to my own present day. And this is what I want to conclude with, it should be a history that's full of stories to sustain us. So stories are the most sustaining things that I think that we can learn. They carry us through difficult times. That's what the Bible does. Lincoln often referred to stories out of American history. When at the beginning of the Civil War, he gave a speech in New Jersey to the assembly there about how he remembered reading in George Washington's biography about the Battle of Trenton. He was speaking in Trenton, and how the cause for which they fought was something more than just the immediate one. A beautiful statement. So stories to sustain us, the way the Passover Seder has sustained the Jewish people for millennia. And an example of that I want to conclude with is a poem that used to be taught to every school child in America. And I would bet a few of us who have gray hair in the audience, or a few of you, may know, listen, my children, and you shall hear of what? Midnight Ride of Paul Revere, indeed, yes. On the 18th of April in 75, hardly a man is now alive. You all probably know that stanza, at least the gray among us. But maybe you never heard, or you don't remember, the final stanza. It's a long poem. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, a neglected, I think, a much better poet than we seem to be willing to recognize today. Here's how it ends. It describes, and by the way, I acknowledge Paul Revere's Ride is not an accurate in every historical detail. It's not wildly inaccurate. You know, he doesn't have a swarm of killer bees or something like that. He didn't invent things, but it's true. Historians have written about how all these details are not right. Okay. It wasn't just Paul Revere, for one thing. It was a bunch of people, about 60 people, who were going through the countryside. But here, let me read this final stanza. It's really quite beautiful, and it very much to our moment. For born on the night wind of the past, through all our history to the last, in the hour of darkness and peril and need, the people will waken and listen to hear the hurrying hoofbeats of that steed and the midnight message of Paul Revere. Isn't that great? There's a saying out there that I make America great again. Well, my version of it is that what we have done before, we can do again. So that looking to the past gives us an exemplum, a model of what we can accomplish. And one final thought. Longfellow wrote this poem in 1860. It was published in the early 1861. Longfellow was an abolitionist. That is, he was opposed to the institution of slavery, wanted to see it abolished. And, of course, the Civil War was, in large measure, fought in the end about that very issue. So, in some way, I think you can see that he is taking heart, taking energy, taking focus, taking direction from the energy of that poem, of that event about which he wrote the poem, of Paul Revere's Ride. That Paul Revere's Ride is something that we, living in the 1860s, we living in the 2020s, can take heart from. So it's another way that looking backward is a way of looking forward. Thank you.
Good morning. It's a real pleasure to be here. Every political philosopher has always recognized that there must be some conviction, usually embodied in the form of a story that can be told, comprehended, and taken to heart by all, which produces a sense of community and unites the hearts of those who call themselves fellow citizens. Without that fellow feeling, there is no basis for mutual trust. And where there is no trust, there can be no freedom. Harry Jaffa. America's central conviction is the principle all men are created equal, and the story, one of founding. It is our founding story with its accompanying principles that unites us as Americans And there is no better opportunity than America's 250th birthday to remind ourselves who we are as a single people. Historic sites tell the American story through place. While we certainly owe gratitude to Washington, Jefferson, and Madison, their homes have come to symbolize more than individual legacies. Mount Vernon stands for the American national character, Monticello for the Declaration, and Montpelier for the Constitution. For these reasons, our historic sites are a target. Transforming them is a way to transform America. In 2022, I released a report about Mount Vernon, Monticello, and Montpelier, a tale of three presidential houses, with Mount Vernon being the good, Monticello the bad, and Montpelier the ugly. Sadly, there are no exhibits dedicated to James Madison at Montpelier. The result of this report was a change in leadership at the National Trust for Historic Preservation, the Montpelier Foundation, the Montpelier Board, and Monticello. Ahead of America 250, we at Heritage are going to use this work as a proof of concept for a heritage guide to historic sites. This guide will take the form of an interactive online map geared towards parents. The map will pinpoint historic sites all around the country, at least one per state, and grade them A, B, and C, offering an evaluation about how comprehensive and accurate the exhibits and tours are, if there is an issue with ideological bias, and how family-friendly the site is. These evaluations will also provide educational resources like book recommendations and indicate why this site is important from our scholars, even if the site operators fail to do so. Our aim is to elevate the sites that are doing a good job of telling the American story, as well as draw attention to those who are trending in an ideological direction, which will help bring accountability into the historic site and museum space. As a whole, this will be a map of the American story, including state history, the spirit of American enterprise, heroic figures, literature and art, and pivotal events. We will introduce the 13 original colonies this fall and the full map by Washington's birthday in 2026, so parents will have the opportunity to plan their summer vacations and go to historic sites as a way to celebrate America 250. Beyond this first round, our intention is to add to the map over the years. A form on the website will allow people to indicate if a site has changed since it was last evaluated, voice disagreement with an evaluation, or recommend an additional site that we should go to. Just imagine grandmothers across America fact-checking errant tour guides at these sites. After the evaluations are complete, we will analyze the C sites to try and identify trends, to try and figure out who are driving these ideological motivations at these sites. I suspect one of those bad actors will be our very own government. In the private sector, the Mellon Foundation is the largest donor to arts and humanities in the country, and they believe that monuments to soldiers demonstrate that America is an inherently violent nation. I think the work of Sabin, as Matt mentioned, just demonstrates how absurd that claim is. But I want to end to talk about why I think this project matters, both for American families and for our country. Going to historic sites is something families do together. They offer a touch grass activity in a world fraught with screens and disembodied interactions. Since I've become the museum lady, so many people have said to me that they remember going to Mount Vernon or Monticello as a child and how that experience is just so fixed in their minds. Providing opportunities for families, especially multiple generations, to come together is not trivial. After all, humanity passes by way of the family. What happens when the chances to learn about Madison, Washington, or the brave men and women who consecrated this ground far above our poor power to add or detract are simply gone? That is the unseen cost, the loss of public education. Then there is the ugly reality of parents taking their children to Montpelier and the exhibit for kids being about race and slavery, with book recommendations by the Southern Poverty Law Center that contain imagination exercises that encourage children to imagine themselves as the aggressor, whipping an individual until, quote, his flesh cried blood. I think this indicates to us that we're at a crossroads with our historic sites. They are not totally captured, but they are trending in an ideological direction. This evidences both the urgency of the moment and the opportunity to provide a vision. We want Americans, especially our children, to go to Mount Vernon and learn how George Washington formed an American national character, which was an exceptional project for an exceptional man. To journey to Monticello and give all honor to Jefferson, to the man who introduced into a merely revolutionary document an abstract truth applicable to all men and all times. To visit a library in Montpelier and reflect that a Virginia scholar who cared first about America made possible the miracle of Philadelphia. This journey reveals the American story as an adventure story, an experiment replete with the opportunity to demonstrate to ourselves and to the world that human beings are capable of self-government. Through truthful commemorations, generations come to know and rediscover the American story, to realize that not only is that story remarkable, but that it belongs to them. What will be written in the months and years ahead by future citizens and statesmen will depend on whether Americans choose to remember the good over the bad, so that this nation, conceived in liberty, might long endure. Thank you.
I'll go fast. Clock's ticking, so I better run. We're a great country, and don't we deserve great monuments to tell our history? I mean, come on. Throughout our history, when the nation faltered, when wounds ran deep and identities fractured, Americans did not retreat into silence. No, they did not. We built monuments, right? Not merely to commemorate, but to repair, to remind, to renew, and most importantly, to redefine. After the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln stood at Gettysburg not just to consecrate the dead, but to awaken the living. And his words, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, redefined American unity. And that moment was not about closure, it was about becoming whole again. Decades later, as the country emerged into a global role, Roosevelt joined the sculptor Borglum to carve into the giant granite walls of South Dakota the faces of 4 presidents who had shaped a fledgling republic into a confident nation. Mount Rushmore was not nostalgia. It was ambition, etched in stone, vast, defiant, and hopeful. Then came World War II. While tyranny threatened the globe, Franklin Roosevelt oversaw the construction of the Jefferson Memorial. Even as war raged, he engraved, "All men are created equal," a reminder that America was not just fighting a war, it was defending a promise. After that war, President Eisenhower envisioned unity on 2 fronts, symbolic and physical. He commissioned the Iwo Jima Memorial. It's 35-foot-high figures, honoring valor and sacrifice. And he built the interstate highway system, a monument of asphalt and ambition, binding a vast and varied people into one nation. And in 1986, after the upheaval of Vietnam, Watergate, and inflation, Ronald Reagan led the restoration of the Statue of Liberty. He did not merely preserve a monument, he rekindled it, ensuring Lady Liberty's flame would shine for the weary, the displaced, and the dreaming. Each of these moments shared a single conviction: symbols matter. Memory matters. That when we forget who we are, we must build something that reminds us. I believe now, at this moment in our national story, we are again in need of such a reminder. Because I have seen what happens when people forget what they are capable of. In 1982, I was 19 years old, and I was a woodworker in South Philly. It was honest work, but there was something terribly wrong. I felt anxious, and I had no purpose. I felt trapped. I was going nowhere fast. And then at 4 p.m. on October 21st, I stopped. And at 4:01, I stepped off that path. I quit my job. I walked to a payphone, and I called the Philadelphia College of Art. I didn't know how to draw. I didn't even know what a portfolio was. I had no certainty, just a pull and a hunger to make something that was meaningful, that would reveal what the human spirit actually was. That moment, that 4 p.m. moment, set the course of my life. I wanted to sculpt form that brought meaning back to the arts, to restore what had been severed, to bring back a language embodied in that art. It's a language of resilience, order, beauty, and soul. So I went to the greats, because that's what I thought art was. I thought it was Michelangelo. I thought it was Leonardo. I thought it was Raphael. And in 2015, I competed against 360 global teams and won the right to sculpt the National World War I Memorial. Thank you. I appreciate that. That memorial restored that lost language. It took me 9.5 years, mostly because Washington is full of bureaucrats. Seriously.
Yep.
Sorry. It was inaugurated on September 13th of last year. It's nothing like it in the US. There are 38 figures. It's 60 feet long. It weighs 25 tons. And I explored 12,000 poses to come up with 38, did 25 iterations. Each figure, each one of those unique individual figures is not just an ornament, it's a vessel. Each one of them carries a story. I want to tell you about one of those models. This is Ricky Zambrano. 7 years in the Marine Corps, 7 months of combat duty in Afghanistan. Less than an hour after his plane hit U.S. soil, one of his comrades shot himself in the head. Ricky spiraled, ballooned up to 300 pounds. He went to the VA. The VA gave him 18 different pills. One night, he took all those pills at once. You can imagine what happened. Something lifted him up out of that bed, brought him to the toilet, he threw him up, changed his life. He said to me, "No one's coming to save you. It's within you." That's what he learned. Today, Ricky's completely different. He worked for me for 2.5 years. He's a force of nature. He's alive, he's fierce. He didn't let the war break him, and it did not define his end. When Ricky posed for the memorial, he did not just bring his body, he brought the weight of survival. That sculpture does not only portray a soldier, it embodies his soul, a soul that refused to surrender. That's him under the flag. That is what art must do. Not flatter, not shock, but to speak to what is most enduring in us all, the ability to rise to the occasion, to hold fast, to become more than our circumstances. Yet too often now, our art, our discourse proclaims the opposite. It insists that life is chaos, that beauty is a lie, that meaning is a relic. It whispers that nothing binds us, that we are isolated, fragmented, beyond redemption, alienated from each other. And I think this is a bunch of hooey. I completely reject this. I believe that the universe is created in a divine order, that human form contains grandeur. We are made in God's image. That to create is not to impose meaning, but it's to reveal it. The artist is not a god. I am a servant. I'm in service of something way greater than myself. And the nation must remember that it is spirit, that is not held only in tweets and slogans, but in stories and symbols that will outlast us all. Which brings me to one final story. On the far left side of the World War I memorial, there is a little girl, and on the far right, a young woman. 4.5 years passed between them, just as they did in the war itself. That child is my daughter, Madeline. When I look at that bronze, I don't just see a sculpture. I see a question. What kind of country are we leaving her? A country that forgets or one that remembers? A country that's fractured or one that aspires? We are standing right now at our own 4 p.m., and the choice is ours. And that is why I've dedicated myself to a new monument. This is my shameful plug. But I am in service of something way larger than myself. It's not about me. It's about representing you, we the people. I want to build on all those things that our history came before. One that calls this generation not to despair and shame and self-hatred, but that destiny that is ours. It's called the Grand Liberty Arch, and it's to celebrate our 250th birthday. It won't point backwards, but it will point forwards. It will not erase, but it will elevate. It will remind us that America's greatness was never about perfection, but about perseverance, never about stasis, but about striving, about agency, self-responsibility, and manifesting our each and unique individual freedoms as human beings. Sure, it's built in bronze and stone, but ultimately it's about spirit. America is not just an idea. It is a people. And this monument is for we the people. Thank you.
And I want to begin with a general question keying off of one of the questions I have here. What can people do in their own communities in terms of the things you're talking about?
You want me to start?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
If you've got something to say.
Well, I always have something to say. It may not be worth hearing. But no, I think that my bailiwick in this conversation is schools and formal education. But I think parents should be very alert to what their children are being taught, especially if their children are in public schools, which I'm not opposed to universally. And particularly charter schools are a wonderful arena of innovation. So, but be attentive to what the caliber of their education. As I said, I really can't stress this enough, that a proper instruction in history is a form of moral formation. It's not just learning the facts, but it's forming you to be the kind of person we need to perpetuate what we are as a country. I'd also be very attentive to the influences of popular culture, which are mostly malign, in terms of giving young people an accurate image of their country. I do think it's important that we not accentuate the positive to the exclusion of the negative, of the features. As Sabin said, you know what, we're not perfect. And in a way, if you present a pattern of perfection, there's nothing to improve on, nothing to stimulate those perseverance glands that really have to be part of the equipment that young people bring to the task of citizenship. So I would be attentive to all those things.
Brenda?
Two quick ideas. So there's a National America 250 Commission, but there are state commissions as well, and there are varying degrees of involvement and
So is the state commission in Colorado any good?
right.
Anybody?
So
Anybody? Do you know what they're doing?
this is
I would
my
dig into
advice.
that if I were you.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Look
It
into
looks
what
pretty
your
bad to me.
Yeah.
Look into what your state commissions are doing to celebrate America 250. Get involved. Find ways to celebrate America 250 because this should be a ground-up effort, right? We should not be simply relying on the
I'm
national
sorry,
government.
just to emphasize, there's there's a task force in the commission, and they're doing those things. So all these big things we see that the administration influence, they have no effect on what's going on in the states. The states control their own commissions.
Yes.
Which means if you're interested in what's going to happen in Colorado next year, you got to get involved in that commission.
Yes, so that's,
And-
and then my second piece of advice is one of Sabin and my frustrations. The Andrew Mellon Foundation has poured $500 million into transforming our national monuments landscapes, which means taking down monuments and erecting new ones that I would say are not very good. So take a look at that because they are pouring funding into these communities to make that happen. They're working with universities. So do some investigating into that because they've really fallen under the radar and they could be the ones driving these efforts. They're not necessarily grassroots.
Sabin?
We are a country of builders and we are a country of creators. That's what our founding fathers spoke about. Going back to what Bill said, education is at the basis of it all. The schools have directed our young into a direction that is like a box. And this is a country of limitlessness, vision. And so perception breeds reality. It goes back to what's being taught in the schools. And that's 1 minute and 15 seconds. Go next question.
No, go ahead.
I just also, to add to what Brenda said, you know, the state and local historical associations, even small towns, where I live in Michigan, every little town has its little historical society, and they actually, they do worthwhile things. These are people who appreciate the past and they don't want it to be lost. But they can put on things. They can go to the state commission and say, hey, we want here in Greenfield, Mississippi, we want to have this. And so if you have a local organization, it can be part of this parade too.
And one thing I would add is you know, we've been bombarded for so long, which is truly a problem, about, you know, all this wokeness taking over our culture. Having said that, I would add on the opposite side of that, there's still a lot of very good people out there, including in a lot of these places, who don't like that. And I'll give you a particular example. When I was working on my book, I went to Philadelphia to go to Independence Hall. And you can go there, it's a little secret, but I'll tell you guys. You can go there before the tours and get in there by yourself and just walk around. And of course there are guards and things. But there was someone with the Park Service standing there, and I started talking with her, and I was asking these very specific questions. He said, who are you? You're a professor, aren't you? Yeah, I am. What are you doing? Oh, I'm working on a book. Oh, where do you teach? And she finally drew it out of me. I said, I'm at Hillsdale College. And she said, I know Hillsdale. What's your name? I told her my name. She said, I know your book. She said, we need more people. And then we had this conversation about how they're being instructed from the top down by the National Park Service to do certain things and not say certain things. And she said, we all hate that. None of us like it. So they're out there. So there's grounds for this work having a great effect in places, but people like us have to go out and get involved in it.
There's a lady at
I'm
the
trying to
podium.
be like Brenda.
Yeah.
Got my hand up.
We're done.
Thank you so much, Dr. Spalding.
Thank
you
you
to
all.
our panelists. I have a couple announcements. First,